Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our webinar tonight. I am sure other people will kind of filter in. So I'll get started with an introduction. My name is Annie Behari, and I am the Program Manager here at Service to School. Thank you so much for coming to our essay webinar tonight. We'll be talking about the fundamentals of admissions essays. This webinar will be about 30 minutes, and then we'll have time for about 10 or 15 minutes of questions. My colleague, Sydney Mathis, is in the chat, and she can answer any questions you have as they come up, but she will also be saving some questions that I can address later. When you're asking a question, please use the chat box. Do not use the question and answer box. The chat box just allows us all to see the question. And it would be really great if your questions were general, enough so that they could help the entire group. If you do have a more specific question, you can always reach out to me by email, which I will share with you later. Also, if you're having any kind of technical or any technical issues, feel free to restart or your browser or your computer. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared after tonight, so you'll be able to access it at a later point too. So let's get started. As I said earlier, my name is Annie Behari. I have been working in higher education for the last 8 years. I did my undergraduate work at Boston University in Massachusetts, and then I did my graduate work in higher education at Harvard University. As soon as I graduated, I started working in college admissions at Lafayette College in Pennsylvania. Lafayette is a small liberal arts college, but it's actually the smallest Division I school in the country. So small school, really big school spirit. As part of my job there, I read applications from the New England area, and I helped make admissions decisions with a committee. I then moved on to Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. At Hopkins, I read applications from New York City and India. I also managed the transfer admissions process there, which means that I read transfer applications and ran the committees that made the decisions. Since Hopkins, I've been working in college counseling and advising. I've spent the last couple of years also reading for applications, first-year student applications for Georgia Tech in a part-time capacity. So all of that is to say that I'm very familiar with the application process and with the admissions process, especially as it relates to students who are not the traditional high school applicant. And that's the point of tonight. We want to talk about admissions essays and how you can approach them as someone who's not applying at the age of 17. You have a lifetime of experience, and it can be a real benefit to your application if you can vocalize that experience through your essays. I have a noisy dog, just in case you hear a dog. So before we start talking about the actual essay prompts, I do want to start with something really basic. Essays are important because they are the only opportunities you have to tell colleges about yourself in your own words. So everything else that they know about you is through the application, through your transcripts, through letters of recommendation that are written for you. So this is the chance you have to make your own voice heard. And if you're wondering where you find essay questions, they are usually a part of the application. That means if you would like to know what questions are being asked, you have to create an account for your application, and you'll see the essay question as a part of that application. The most commonly used application is the Common app, hence the name. And you might encounter the Coalition app. Those are two of the most basic applications out there. But there are others. So for example, the University of California system, they have their own application. We'll be talking about their essay questions as well. Or rather, they're not essay questions, but we'll be talking about those as well. Just know that you're not going to find, UCLA on a common application. You're right. It'll have its own application. And that's where you're going to find the essays. Also, just one thing to note, you only have to submit one application. So if all of your schools accept the Common App, great. you only need to fill out the Common App for those schools. Just choose an essay and choose an application and stick with it. Another thing to note is that essays can and do change between years. That means if you're here tonight and you're applying for the fall of 2024, the essay prompts we look at tonight might not be the same prompts you have to answer. And that's why we don't encourage applicants to start writing essays until they've officially been released for that academic year. So I found the essay questions tonight, both on the applications and also on the college websites, but I made sure that they were listed as current, 2022 to 2023. So don't attempt to write an essay for an application that's not due yet. We have no way of knowing whether those questions will change. And then finally, there are different types of essays depending on how you're applying. If you are applying as a first-year student, which means that you have little to no coursework after high school, your essays will be different from the essays you have to write if you are applying as a transfer student. Some schools will overlap. We'll see that with the UCs tonight, but for the most part, make sure that you're answering the correct essay for how you're applying. Okay, so let's start with the most basic essay. And I say basic because when most of us saying that we're writing a college essay, this is the one we mean. This is the Common App personal statement for first-year students. You'll see that you have a choice of 8 prompts. It does not matter which prompt you choose. There are no preferences. They're all designed to help you talk about yourself. And that's the first big tip. And it probably seems obvious, but these essays should be personal. They should be about you and who you are today. Again, coming in as a non-traditional student, you'll have so many more experiences that you can talk about compared to like a 17-year-old applicant. A common mistake that I see some older writers making is kind of starting in the past. I was born when, or as a kid, and while those experiences are totally valid, they're not entirely relevant to who you are today. So it might not be the best use of space to start so far back in your history. That doesn't mean that you can't reference the past. I just wouldn't spend a lot of time doing that. You want to make sure that whatever you're sharing with the colleges is current. This essay is also probably the best example of an essay that should be a narrative. So this is not your standard 5-paragraph academic essay. You don't need like an introductory paragraph or a conclusion you don't need supporting evidence. Instead, this is a story. That means that you can use all the elements of a story, like dialogue or a change in time. You can absolutely be, or you should be, telling a story that is personal to you. Many colleges will tell you that that these stories should be so personal that they can only be written by you. That's the level of detail that you want. So keep that in mind as well. They're personal statements for a reason. Sydney's going to drop a couple of links in the chat for of colleges that collect good examples of personal statements and writing supplements. So feel free to take a look at those, but just keep in mind, when those schools are pulling their best essays to share with you on this website, they are pulling their best, right? They're pulling the ones that are standing out in their entire pool. So don't feel intimidated when you see those. Just know that they are the best, but I think that they can help you understand the writing style that you should be looking for. I wanted to also highlight the coalition application essay questions. They are very similar to the Common App questions. So the same rules apply. Tell a story, make sure that it's detailed and that it's personal to you. And when I say personal to you, one other thing I just want to mention, sometimes it's easy to talk about someone else, right? Like you want to talk about a relative or maybe someone who played like a leadership role in your life. Those are not essays that are personal enough. You want to talk about yourself, not about someone else. So let's shift gears to talk about the transfer personal statements. These are, there's no standardization. in the transfer admissions process, unfortunately. So while all first-year students have to write a personal statement like the Common App essay, that's not the case with transfer students. Some schools might require this, some schools might not. However, you will probably be asked this question in some form somewhere. Why are you looking to transfer? So to me, there are two parts to this kind of transfer personal statement prompt. The first part is, why are you looking to transfer? And the second part is, why are you looking to come to our school? And what are you hoping to achieve? So that's what's happening here in these two kind of general transfer personal statement prompts. Any response to these kinds of questions needs to answer both parts. So when I was at Johns Hopkins University, and I was running the transfer admissions process, I always, in every committee that we had to answer that to each other. So we had to say, Brady is looking to leave this school for this reason. Brady wants to come to Hopkins for this reason. So for the first part of these kinds of questions, for example, provide a statement discussing your educational path, or provide a statement that addresses your reasons for transferring. Answer that first. If you're graduating from a 2-year institution and you're looking to complete a bachelor's degree, that's it. I mean, that's a valid reason to transfer. That's what you should write. If you're looking to leave a 4-year school for another 4-year school, your reasons for leaving that original 4-year school, those reasons need to be clear. And it also must be diplomatic. So it is not okay to say, I hate my current school, or my current school is a party school. Those are not acceptable responses. If you're dissatisfied with where you are, you have to find a diplomatic way to say that. It is also not acceptable to say, I want to leave my current school because your school is more prestigious. We got that answer a lot at Hopkins, and that is it's also not a valid response to why you want to transfer. So some things that you might say are, you're looking to be challenged more academically, you're looking for more opportunities somewhere, whether that's in the classroom or outside of it. Maybe you're making a life change and you're moving for whatever reason. Those are all valid reasons to be moving on to another school. Maybe you changed your major, or you're looking for a particular kind of academic environment. I mean, those are all valid reasons to be moving on to another school. But whatever your reason is, it should be easy to kind of pull it out of your essay. And then for the second part of these questions, how does continuing your education at a new school help you achieve your future goals? What are the objectives you're hoping to provide, to achieve? Again, be clear and concise. So again, you could be looking for more opportunities. You're looking for that correct or that academic environment that aligns with what your goals are. Whatever the reason, be detailed. It's okay to reference next steps. Maybe you want to go into graduate school, or you want to go to a particular kind of job, and this new school will offer you resources to get there. So feel free to use the school's website to find details or programs or extracurricular activities or networking opportunities, or whatever it is, to line up what you're looking for and what the institution is offering. So feel free to use the school's website to find those answers. So this tip is to answer every part of the prompt, because in committee, you just never know what are the things that they're asking these questions for a reason, right? So what do they need to pull out of your application to understand where you're coming from? So you want to make sure that you've given them all the information that they need. These essays, in my opinion, are the most difficult ones. These are the Common App writing supplemental prompts. The personal statement that we just looked at, those tend to be a little bit longer, maybe 500 to 650 words. And these essays tend to be shorter, but they are so much more detailed. So these supplemental essays are about you and the school you're applying to. And obviously they're called supplemental essays because they supplement the larger essay. So here's Michigan's prompt. and which is for first-year students, and it's basically what we call a community essay. So it's asking, what community are you a part of, and how would you describe your place in that community? This is actually a pretty tame one. Brown has one that is a little bit more complicated, which is, what community are you a part of? How do you participate in it? And how will you contribute to that community at Brown? So this one is not as intense as it could be. My tip here, of course, for these supplemental essays is to be detailed, but also to think outside of the box. It might be easy to rely on a more general community. For example, you know, I'm a woman, so I'm a part of a female community, and here's my story about how I contribute to a female community. Or I am West Indian, you know, I'm a part of a Caribbean community in my city. Here's how I, you know, take part in that community. But I would encourage you to think a little bit outside of the box. So what are communities that you're a part of that might not be necessarily the most obvious? So they give you some examples here of communities like religion, ethnicity, which again, I think most of us would immediately think of, but also cuisine, ideology, intellectual heritage. So here's an example that I would use, I think. I'm a vegetarian. Well, I'm technically a pescatarian, and I'm one of 3 in my family, and when we have Thanksgiving or Christmas or any other holiday get together, me and the 2 other pescatarians are talking about what are we going to make, and like, what are we going to be eating? And so that's a part of it's a small community, but it is a part of a community that I'm a part of. And my particular role is that I'm always organizing, you know, what we're going to eat and who's making what. So that's an example of an identity that I have that maybe is not obvious to most people. So again, I would encourage you to think outside of the box when it comes to these kind of supplemental questions that can be taken in a variety of ways. So let's look at the second, which is describe the unique qualities that attract you to Michigan schools, and how will that curriculum support your interests? So again, it's essentially asking you what you want to study at Michigan and why. Break the essay question down into pieces so that you're answering every part, and be detailed. Go on the Michigan page and find programs, classes, instructors, things that make you excited about applying. And again, they're asking about the unique qualities. So these are not qualities that you should be able to find at any large school in the Midwest. They want you to go a step deeper. And when you write your supplemental essay, you can reference those Michigan specifics, but remember to connect it to what you're looking for, right? Remember the second part of that prompt. How would that curriculum support your interests? So if you want to earn a biology degree to eventually go on to medical school, feel free to talk about the biology department at Michigan, research opportunities, again, professors, interesting classes that they're offering. You want to make it very Michigan specific. The same is true for other supplemental essays. Well, actually any supplemental essay. This is one from BU, and it's very common. Basically, why BU? Frankly, it can be hard for colleges to tell whether or not you're serious about applying to their school. And so sometimes this why school question is their way of understanding, have you really thought about what you want to do at our school and what your goals are? So be detailed, pull out those specifics and mention them. The level of detail that you're looking for, especially when it comes to a big school like Michigan or BU, is you want to make sure that it's very clear to those schools that you're talking about them. There are, you might know, hundreds of undergraduate schools in Boston. So you want to be able to say, yeah, I'm talking about BU in particular. That's the level of detail you want in your response. When I was at Hopkins, we had a version of this question, and many people wrote they wanted a degree from a mid-sized school in the Mid-Atlantic. They wanted to be in a city. They wanted to have Division I sports. They wanted research opportunities. I mean, that's like 75% of the schools like in that area. So you want to be so specific that it's clear that you're talking about that school and that school alone. So the tip in this section, make the connection between you and your interest in these schools very clear. So feel free to get specific, to reference information on websites, to call out classes and professors and other elements of that school. Try to draw a clear connection between what you're looking for and what's offered at that school. So let's look at some transfer supplemental prompts. They are not different from the first year supplemental prompts. They all want you to draw that connection between you and their schools. So all the same rules apply. One thing to note about supplemental essays, the more highly selective a school is, the more essays there are. That's just a fact. I think it comes down to basically colleges needing or wanting more material to help them make their admissions decisions. But please know that going into the process. If you're applying to more than one highly selective school, just be prepared to write a lot. So let's look at Princeton. I'm not going to go over every essay here because a lot of them kind of use the same tips. You know, these are major specific questions, these first two. What are you looking for at our school? You know, why our school, basically. Take a look at the word count here, 150 words for this extracurricular activity and work experience essay. So with supplemental essays, you don't usually have the luxury of space. So it's best to answer in a concise way. I do want to draw your attention to the more about you questions. Some schools will use these short answer questions to get to know you better, with the added challenge of doing so in very few words. So my best tip here is, again, to think outside the box. Wake Forest has a series of questions like this. They might still have it. That I think in 100 characters, the first question was, tell me where you would go if you could go anywhere in the world. And I always caution my students not to say what I consider to be the expected answers. So I've had a lot of students say like Hawaii, Bora Bora, some other beautiful tropical place that might be hard to get to. But one year I had a student who said Siberia. She wanted, if she could go anywhere in the world, she wanted to go to Siberia because she was Russian and her relatives were imprisoned in gulags in the 1940s in Siberia. And so that's an answer that shares, I think, a little bit about what's important to her, but it's not the answer that most people would say. So for things like these, it can be tough, but I would encourage you to think about what comes to you immediately. Can you go a layer deeper than that? And then also think about, what does it say about you? So what brings you joy? If it's going outside in nature, what is that communicating to the college? Is there a place to go outside in nature in Princeton, New Jersey? I'm not sure, right? So I would encourage you to think critically about what your answers could be for these short answer questions, because you're really trying to tell them a lot in very few words. So that's Princeton. Let's now look at the University of Chicago. So far, we've seen pretty standard essay questions. I would bet you'd encounter any one of these in your applications. But here comes the University of Chicago, which notoriously has some of the most creative essay questions. And the first question, the required question, a standard one. Like, how does Chicago help you achieve your goals and things like that? And then here's the extended essay. I don't know if you're familiar with these, but these are all written by current Chicago students. And they're all meant to be way outside the box, very, very creative questions. I don't have any advice for how to answer these because they are truly so out there. But I can tell you what Chicago is looking for. They're looking for strong writers who can create reasoning and support their opinions. So my biggest tip here is to give yourself plenty of time. If you're writing an essay for a school like Chicago, or an essay that really requires a lot of thought on your part, it's not something you can put together in 2 hours, right? You want to be able to sit down and think critically about, what advice would a wisdom tooth have? Okay, whatever your reasoning is, whatever you think a wisdom tooth would say, what is the reasoning for that? And you have to be able to support whatever answer you give. So those are some supplemental transfer supplemental essays. And you can see that they're for highly selective schools, that there are a lot of them. And you really should be thinking kind of beyond what you think most people would write in order to stand out. Let's also talk now about the UC personal insight questions. So earlier I said that I refer to them as essay questions. The UCs actually don't do that. They don't want them to be called essays because these are not essays. They are PIQs, and they're meant to highlight a specific part of your identity or your interest, depending on the questions you answer. So really for these, there's no room for narrative. These are clear questions that you have to answer. I'm pulling up both, but actually they're the same prompts. So you have to answer depending on how you're applying. If you're applying as a first year, you choose 4 of the 8. If you're applying as a transfer, you choose 3 of the 8. And as I said, they're all kind of designed for you to talk about something in particular. So what would you say is your greatest talent or skill? Choose one. How have you developed it over time? That's what you answer. The UCs, I do encourage you, if you're applying to the UCs, and this is true for obviously any University of California school, you'll have to answer these questions. Take a look at the website because they do offer their own tips and their own kind of things to consider. I also watched this video and found it very helpful. So I would recommend checking out the UC page. I think they do a really great job of trying to provide everything that you might need right on their website. The last essay that we'll talk about is the VetLink Addendum. So if you're not familiar with the VetLink Addendum, it is a feature of the VetLink partnership that Service to School has with certain colleges and universities. So if you're applying to our partner schools, you should be filling out the VetLink Addendum. It's a really great kind of benefit of working with Service to School. And there is an essay as a part of that VetLink Addendum. It allows you, as you can see, it allows you to talk about your military service in a way that admissions officers can understand. So you can reflect on your military service in the VetLink Addendum essay. If you filled out the application, if you looked at the application, you can probably tell that it's just not designed for adults. It's designed for, 16 to 18-year-olds. And so the VetLink Addendum and the essay allow you to reflect on your military experience in addition to the actual application. So it really provides more information for a college. It's always good when you can provide more context for a college. I will say that one thing I've noticed having read a few VetLink Addendum essays is that it is really easy to forget to answer all the parts of the prompt. If you answer all the parts of the prompt, I actually think it helps create a very seamless essay because it asks you, about your experiences, how did it shape you as a person, and finally, in what way did it influence your decision to apply to college? And I think that's a really nice way to kind of address why you're moving from this current phase of your life to one where you'll be a college student. So I would definitely encourage you to look at all the parts of the prompts when it comes to the VetLink essay. Keep in mind that not every school is going to get this essay. So again, only our partner schools are going to get the VetLink addendum. So you can definitely use parts of it in your applications for other schools, but I would definitely encourage you to minimize the overlap. So don't use the VetLink addendum essay for Princeton and also have this essay be your Common App essay, right? Like I said, your ability to share essays with colleges is huge because it really is the only thing that can help you voice who you are. And so you want to take advantage of every opportunity that you have to share different parts of your personality and your identity through the essays. So definitely try to minimize whatever overlap in content there might be. So just to recap, whatever essay you're writing, make it personal. Make sure that you're using recent examples from your life. Again, not to say that you can't reference your past, but you want to end on the note of this is who you are now, because colleges are admitting who you are now. When it comes to like the word count, I just wouldn't want to spend 400 words talking about the past when it might not be entirely relevant to who you are today. These are not your typical academic essays. There are lots of great resources out there for learning about what the correct writing style is, or what the best writing style is, like the couple of links that Sydney dropped earlier. So I'd recommend checking those out. Memoirs are also a really great way to find out what is the right kind of cadence for a personal statement kind of essay. Answer all parts of the prompts. I can't stress that enough, how it's so important that you are giving colleges the information that they're asking for. Be detailed and make the connection. Again, this is so huge. If you're applying to a college and they're asking you to talk about what you're looking for and what the college is offering, you need to make that connection, right? I'm looking to study biomedical engineering, and I want to do that at Georgia Tech because Georgia Tech has these kinds of resources and I will take advantage of them by doing X, Y, Z. You want that level of connection and that level of detail. It can feel a little bit disingenuous. It can feel a little bit weird to talk about what you would do at a school, but that's what they're looking for. They're looking for you to say how you would take advantage of what they have to offer. Think outside the box. So whenever there are questions where there's a little bit room for creativity, or a little room for a way for you to share something about who you are that maybe might not be evident to, like, based on like initial appearances, take advantage of it, right? So I would encourage you, in almost every essay question you write, think about what you want to say and then try to go a layer deeper. So what do you think most people would say? And then can you think of something that's a little bit more specific to you? You can't do it everywhere, but I think if you can, it can really help you stand out. Give yourself time. So make sure that you are not starting this process too late. And that will differ for everybody, obviously, based on your deadlines, but I would always make sure that you are, when you know when a deadline is or what colleges you want to apply to, I would try to find those essays, put them together in a Google Doc, and take a look at them periodically. Write a couple of sentences for every prompt. For example, for like the Common App, if you're not sure where to start, just kind of like start jotting down notes. I mean, you really want to give yourself time to put together the best essays that you can. The last tip is so basic that I didn't even address it really, but obviously check for punctuation, grammar, spelling errors. Make sure that you're not writing an essay for University of Georgia and sending that to Georgia Tech. That would not be great. You want to make sure that you're kind of on top of the basic stuff. So I do want to encourage you. I'm sure many of you are working with Service to School, but if you are not and you are here tonight, we would love to help you apply to colleges. So please visit our website and we can help you get started from there. And as I promised, here's my contact information. So my email is annie@servicetoschool.org. You can reach out to me if you have specific questions about essays or in general. I'm definitely happy to help at any point. And you can and should connect with us on social media. We always have a lot of really great events. So check out our calendar on our website too. So now I'm going to check out and see if we have any questions. Wow, we have a quiet group. Yeah, I mean, if there are no questions, you know, I'm obviously happy to let you leave. Any tips on going a layer deeper? Yeah, that's a good question. So when there are questions like that encourage you to think a little bit outside of the box, I'm going back to Princeton as an example here. I would start off by thinking about what would you think most people would say? What brings you joy? I mean, I imagine a lot of people would say, like, you know, going outside for walks or hanging out with family or hanging out with friends, or so I would try to think of something that is very specific to you. This is, and I something right off the top of my head, so I'm not sure it's the best answer, but I really love like a hot cup of tea at night. And that's a cultural thing in the Caribbean. We have black tea at night, a lot of milk, a lot of sugar. And to me, that is the absolute best. And I think if I could try to squeeze the 50 words and I could say, you know, a hot cup of black tea because it reminds me of, you know, my culture or my grandma, that's something that I don't think everyone would say. Right. And it's very specific to me, and it's specific to my identity as a Caribbean person. So that's an example I think of. I wouldn't just start off with like, even though I do enjoy walking in nature, or I do enjoy, you know, hanging out with friends, and those things do bring me joy. I would try to make something or think of an answer that's very specific to me, if that makes sense. So is there a deadline for when you would like the addendum submitted? Or how soon prior to the application deadline for the school would you like to see it? Oh, that's a really good question. I would say it sort of depends on you. And this is going to sound like an extreme answer, but I would say maybe 2 weeks before the application is due, we should be looking at the addendum together. 2 weeks, I know seems like a lot of time, but frankly, you do want to give yourself time in case I read it, for example, as your staff advisor. And I think that their changes can be made or should be made. So I would say that give yourself enough time. I would like to see it, you know, a couple of weeks before, enough time that I feel comfortable saying, hey, do you mind changing X, Y, Z? If you send it to me like the day before the application is due, and I know that I have to get it over to your VetLink school, I'm not going to feel comfortable telling you to go back and change anything, even if I think that there should be changes. You don't have, so the other question, do you have to submit the VetLink addendum with our application? You don't have to, but I think it is such an incredible feature of our partnership. With just thinking back or reflecting on my experience in higher education, I know how much context matters. And if you can provide context for what you were doing in the military, or what you learned in the military, or how the military prepared you for college, those are huge. Those are, it's so helpful to know that. So I would encourage you for sure to submit it, even though it's a little bit more work. Truthfully, most admissions officers do not have any idea what's required of someone in the military. And there's so much more than most people know. So I would definitely encourage you to do that, to fill out the VetLink addendum, to write that essay too. Do you have an example of trying a unique narrative story to why you want to attend a specific university? That's a really good question. I would argue that, so I've seen these kinds of answers for Hopkins and Lafayette. Why do you want to come here? I've seen students write poems. I've seen them write a narrative. I would say that these are not, I would say the supplemental essays are not the right place to write a narrative. A personal statement it's designed for that. It's very kind of general, but I would say a supplemental essay, when you're writing for a specific university, it should not be a narrative. It should be, like I said, kind of that essay where it connects the dots for the admissions officer. It should be clear. It should be concise. It should be pretty obvious. So I would not recommend doing a narrative. I've read a couple of essays recently for Georgia Tech where the student took it in a narrative way, but I didn't have the answers to the questions that I needed, which were, why do you want to study your major at Georgia Tech? It's nice to know how you came into your interest in computer science, but at the end of the day, that doesn't help me understand like why you want to study that major at our school. So I would encourage you to, if you want to take the narrative route, it's fine as long as you make sure you're answering the prompts and that your reader is walking away with an understanding of why you want to do that at that specific school. Should we be trying to avoid passive voice in these essays? I think so, because you want to highlight you as a doer, right? Like you want to make it clear that you are a person who's going to come to campus and do things. And even though we're just talking about tense, right? We're just talking about passive versus active. I think an essay reads stronger when you're writing it in a more active way. Also, a fun little tip is that when you're writing it in passive voice, you're actually you're using more words to write. So I've actually, when students have come to me, applicants have come to me with word count problems, like they're over their word count. It's usually because they're writing in passive voice, and so they're not if they were to write in active voice, it would be a more effective essay and it would also cut down on the words. One thing I should have mentioned is that when you write your VetLink addendum essay, it does have to come to your service to school staff advisor. So you don't send this essay yourself. We send it to you. We, as in service to school advisors, send it to our points of contact at the school. So if you're applying to Harvard, for example, you will write this essay, you'll send the complete addendum to me, and then I'll send that over to our point of contact. They make sure that it matches up with your application, and then the reader will have access to everything when they're reading. So that's why I mentioned it is really nice if you can give your advisor time to read your essay. And they can kind of have the chance to look at it over and before they send it to everybody. Any other questions or thoughts? Are we in good shape? Okay. In your experience, have you seen more success in acceptance when the addendum is focused on academic potential and schools we've taken part in the military, or more so our experience in the military overseas? Interesting. I don't think that there's one part that's more important than the other, and that's true for the actual college application as well. So I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think any of it's more important. I will say a college is always going to be concerned with, are you able to do the work at our school? That is their number one priority. So it doesn't matter really what you've done while you were overseas and not that it doesn't matter, but it's not as important as the academic potential piece, right? Can you come to our school? Can you do the work? That is the one thing that is kind of non-negotiable, especially for highly selective schools. So I would make sure, when you fill out your addendum, obviously be truthful and be clear with the things that you've done while you were in the military. But when you're writing your addendum essay, I would encourage you to kind of lean on that academic potential piece, as you call it, right? So how are you ready to go to college? Are you ready to be a part of a community, for example? And this, to me, is of course, you're ready to be a part of a community. You were a part of a community in the military. But that's what you need to lean on, is like the academic potential piece, because that's something that the college needs to know about you. So all of it's important, but I would definitely highlight that in your essay. What is your opinion of essays that mention traumatic experiences, grief, difficult moments? Is there a certain way to go about it? That's a really good question. It's very common to hear people say that you shouldn't write about death, disease, and divorce. And the reason for that is because, well, there are a couple of things. The first is these are not universal experiences. They are painful, traumatic experiences for sure, but they're not universal. You know, all of us in our lives will deal with death in some way. So I would encourage you to stay away from things like that, from big emotions, big traumatic experiences like that, because it can be harder. It can be even harder to make that personal to you. It's also, it can be a little bit more difficult, I think, to talk about yourself when you're also talking about these traumatic experiences. So you can mention them. There is a place in the application called additional information. It is like a short answer kind of essay box where you can write and mention things that may have impacted you or your studies or whatever. And that's a really great place to put things like death or grief or any kind of difficult moments that you've encountered. So you can definitely share that with schools. I don't mean to say that you can't share that with them, but I wouldn't make it the focus of your essay. I think it's just harder to write an essay about those topics. Other questions or thoughts or? No, seems like maybe we're all good. Okay. Well, that's all we have. I want to say thank you so much for coming to our webinar tonight. I hope you found it helpful and digestible. As I said before, these questions or this webinar, this session will be available to you after if you want to take a look at it again. But really, give yourself enough time to work on these essays. They are really important, even if they seem like they're not that important. And always make sure you're answering the prompt. Those are my two biggest tips. You can always reach out to me at annie@servicetoschool.org if you have any questions after tonight. And good luck with your college applications. Thank you for coming.